I'd love to first establish myself as the expert on the creator economy, and it will distinguish our sessions, and I'll touch on some of the same things that Shane spoke about, but I'll be doing it more from the perspective of content creators and how the blockchain technology is going to affect how business is being done. So first and foremost, I'm an entertainment attorney. I lead the practice at Nixon Peabody. I started my career in the traditional entertainment world. And what does that mean? I represented, and I still do, writers, directors, producers, on-camera talent, etc. And I did a lot of licensing deals, different from your licensing deals, but where I represented celebrities with their name, image, and likeness. And I don't know if you guys remember, but the very beginning of Keeping Up with the Kardashians and all the Real Housewives, I represented many of the players in the industry, and every new celebrity wanted to have a clothing line, a fragrance, an alcohol line. So I did tons of licensing deals in the space. So in 2014, I come over to Nixon Peabody, I'm starting the entertainment group, and I get a call. And they say, I have a YouTube content creator that wants to do a hair care brand via a licensing deal. I said, okay, great, I'm happy to do the deal. He said, well, how many content creators do you represent? It's 2014. I said, 0. But you asked me to do a licensing deal, and I can do this deal in my sleep. It's the same IP issues. What are we licensing? Which territory? What are the terms, etc. So I get the job. I get my first YouTube content creator. Fast forward 2 years into it, I have 30 content creators. Fast forward to 2022, I think I have 150 different content creators, a team of 6 that work very closely with me on tons of deals in the space. And I represent some of the biggest creators in the world on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, etc. So I keep using this word content creator, right? What is a content creator? Are you a content creator? Everybody in this room, raise your cell phone if you have. You have one? Open it up. Let's all take a picture together, okay? Let's take a selfie. I'm gonna do it this way. I want everybody in it, okay? This is like the Oscars with Ellen. Let's do it. Okay, so I can be a content creator, right? Because I took a photo and I have my device. You could be a content creator too, which is why it's very difficult to define what a content creator actually is. So let's talk about it. Who is a content creator? Okay, we have various definitions. By the way, do you guys all have the translation of my presentation? Everyone has it? Is in the booklet? Okay, great. So there's 3 definitions that we have included here on what a content creator is, and they're very broad and narrow at the same time. So let's talk about the first one. A content maker. A creator makes an asset for the purpose of being consumed and aims to create value for both the audience and themselves, right? By that definition, I could be a content creator, right? I created an asset when I took that photo. It's meant to be consumed. If I post it to Instagram and everybody sees it, does that now make me a content creator? Arguably with this definition, yes, but I would say nobody's really asking me to create that content, right? It doesn't have anything of value, so I probably would not define myself as a content creator. Is it someone that has fame and influence, right? So the second definition, people with fame, influence that create content on digital, democratized channels. Right, so the question there is it only if people care what you have to say, and if you can impact their purchasing decisions, does that make you a content creator? And so the definition of what a content creator is has evolved over time, because it used to be a traditional celebrity. It used to be that you were famous because you were an actor and everyone was like, oh my gosh, Brad Pitt, right? But today, that's not the case. Today we've got micro influencers, people with smaller audiences. We've got these macro, massive influencers that have bigger audiences than Brad Pitt, right? And then this last definition is a digital cult leader. Right, people, if you think about Taylor Swift's fans, yes, she's a musician, but you have her Swifties, right? One of my clients, James Charles, had a problem with YouTube, not with Meta. And so what happened, his fans, he calls them sisters, right? So he is building this big audience, and people follow what he says, and in fact, he's become a leader, right, in his space, in beauty. So I gave you some examples of what these creators look like and what the common traits are. And it's not what your traditional celebrity or athlete was. These people are diverse. These people are LGBTQ plus. These people are advocates. These people create movements around them, right? And this is very different from playing a role on a television series. These are people that gather communities and do business, right? And most of this business exists online. And we'll talk about how that used to be in Web 2.0, but what it looks like with this evolving technology and how it will be impacted. So there's a point to this. We're just setting the stage. So how many creators exist in the world, right? And why is this number so hard to define? Because we talked about how this impact is very real. And you might think, well, if you're a content creator and you have to have millions of followers, it's probably, a narrower population that this impacts, but that's just not true, because it's almost impossible to say how many creators there are, because by that first definition, everybody in this room is a creator. And so these estimates are between 50 million and 370 million people around the world today. But tomorrow, and with adoption of technology and devices, that number will continue to balloon and grow. Did I do that right? Hold on. There we go. All right, so the creator journey, right? So when somebody says, I want to be a content creator, what does that mean, right? It means that they have to first grow an audience, and they do that on various platforms. So we talk about it on YouTube, on Instagram, on Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, etc. There's all these different platforms. And then when they start by collecting an audience, but then they have to engage with them. They have to retain them. They have to be able to build a business around it. And so that third vertical is monetization, right? The difference between me posting and a content creator is money, right? And how do you make that money, and how is that process going to change with the evolution of blockchain? So the creator economy, we're gonna talk about the various verticals of how they make money, right? And in fact, not just how they make money, but the cadence of payment and what some of those issues are and how they may be resolved with blockchain. So again, you have to, in order to understand what the impact of this technology is, you have to understand the landscape today and what some of the problems are, right? So the first way a content creator makes money, and it's the way that they love to make money the most, is passive income. Who doesn't love passive income, right? It's like owning an apartment building and you get mailbox money or the rent check in the mail, right? So that is passive income for a content creator. They create content that lives on YouTube, right? And they split revenue with the platform, 45, 55%, and they get that monthly revenue. Now that revenue doesn't come every day. That revenue comes later in the month of the following month, right? So there's always going to be a lag time. There's not really, you have to be able to have back-end access. Your team has to know how to read the analytics to have a sense of what money you will be making. And also, God forbid, which happens all the time, the algorithm changes, and all of a sudden, all of your views that you thought you could rely on to make you $100,000 this month drop down, and you're either not getting those views, or those views are no longer valuable. Right? And if you are a content creator and this is the income that you're relying on, it's incredibly important that you have that relationship either with the platform or direct with your followers to make sure that that income is continuously coming in and you're not reliant on an algorithm, right? The next thing is advertising revenue and sponsored posts. So that's a content creator getting an advertising deal where they plug a sponsorship into their content and they get paid. And at best, it's a 30-day turnaround from the day it's posted. So a deal starts to get negotiated in January. You send a rough draft of the content in February. You post it in March, right? And then 30 days later, you get paid. So we're talking from January to April, all of this work is getting done, and there's not a single dollar that's been received. Not to mention, you might have an IP issue that happens in between January and April. The influencer might get canceled. It could be that something happens with the platform, like for example, the government rules change with TikTok and all of a sudden it goes away, right? So when you talk about the opportunities of Web3 and what you have with blockchain, you're eliminating some of those risks and you're creating a direct line between the content creator and payment, okay? Same thing with affiliate revenue, podcasts, publishing a book. Forget getting paid today. 2 years later, after it's already out, you're getting your last check on your advance. Subscription courses and Patreon, you're waiting on tips. Again, many examples. Merchandising and anything with a royalty, that's where you see a lot of issues, right? And these accounting firms could be put out of business if everything lives on blockchain because you'll have full transparency, and we can talk about that. But deals that require a royalty payment, not only do those often come quarterly, not even monthly, but it's expensive to audit the report to make sure that what you've received is actually accurate. And you have to spend that money up front only to find out if you're actually owed more. Meanwhile, you've ruined the relationship with the party you're in business with because you're auditing them. Nobody likes that. It's like coming into your house and going through all your shit, right? And then all of a sudden, you're expected to do business with this company that you think is underpaying you. More likely than not, they are. And typical audit provisions will say that if there's an underpayment of at least 5%, the cost of the audit is reimbursed. Okay, great, you make your money back, but that relationship's over, right? So there's a cost to doing business and getting it right. So, who else gets paid when a creator gets paid? Agents take a percentage, managers take a percentage, business managers take a percentage often, lawyers take a percentage. Sometimes employees are incentivized and they get a percentage of revenue that comes in the door. Same thing with independent contractors, but they're relying on the creator getting paid first, and then all of these representatives, me, you're in house, but we're all waiting to get paid, right? And we're hoping that what the content creator received is accurate because we're getting a percentage of what they receive, right? Any questions so far? I don't know if I'm like moving fast or slow. Good? We're good? Okay. So challenges with payment, right? Takes forever. The accuracy, the inefficiency to pay these other participants. The big one I want to talk about is the secondary market sales. And then again, I already touched on these audit costs being really significant. So when we talk about secondary market sales, I would just want to give you an example. So I'm going to pick on Shane. So Shane painted something, and we know that he's not really a painter. So he sells his painting for $5. But Shane is using Michael Jordan's likeness in the metaverse and gets super famous. So now people think that Shane is the next Michael Jordan because they're totally confused. And his painting, all of a sudden, the value of it goes from $5 because no one sees Shane as, a painter or famous. And now that painting is going to be worth $5,000 because it was made by Michael Jordan. So that person that bought the painting for $5 goes and sells it for $5,000. How does Shane benefit from that? He doesn't. And there's no method to see what happened between the first transaction and the subsequent transactions. And he does not participate in the increased value of the asset that he created. So when we talk about IP, and we talk about the value of IP, and we talk about name and likeness, that's where all of this stuff starts to come together, right? So what he created, that painting, he owns that underlying IP. When he sold it to somebody, they own that physical asset. And when they sold it to somebody else, they're getting the benefit of the increase in value. Meanwhile, Shane still owns the underlying IP. Maybe he can license it, maybe not, who knows? But the point is that there's no participation in secondary market sales, and with blockchain and this technology, there's a way to track where the asset goes, and there's an ability to participate in the increased value, okay? So, blockchain, here we go. Here is the solve for some of the problems. I've spent 15 minutes talking about who a content creator is, what their creator economy looks like, and what some of the problems are in the way in which they get paid or don't get paid, as well as the other participants, right? So blockchain value is that the number one thing is it's transparent. It's transparent, it's trackable, it's not changeable. So we don't have to worry about those bad actors coming in and messing with some things and all of a sudden your ledger is no longer accurate, because you can't do that with blockchain, okay? I don't want to just read the slide to you, so if you need a little more time, we good? All right, we're moving on. So Shane touched on this a little bit, but centralized versus decentralized. There's no bank. There's nothing that sits in the center of blockchain, and so it's a decentralized ledger that everybody has access to with full transparency. Again, some of the other attributes is that it's immutable, which we talked about, it's time-stamped, it's unanimous until you disclose who you are or you can be called out. And that's called doxing, and it's a whole different area. It's not part of this presentation, but you could fly under the radar in this instance. And I think that's a benefit, because you have this global economy, it's democratized, and again, everything is unchangeable and viewable. So how is a blockchain made? Right, so here's a beautiful chart, I didn't make it. So you have this new transaction that happens, it gets submitted into this network, right? You've got these computers, they do what they do. Then you have the so that happens. And then a block is formed, right? And it lives on this ledger. So this is, again, I kind of wish we were doing our presentation together, because we can kind of go back and forth, and I always think it's more fun to have a conversation than a presentation. I'm doing my best, you guys. But Web 1, all right, we're reading it. Reading some text, maybe there's an image, but you're mostly consuming it on your computer, and it's not interactive. It's a one-way street, okay? Web 2, interactivity, user-generated content, able to send and receive, right? Platforms like Meta or Facebook, Instagram, right? These are all examples of Web 2. Web 3, read, write, and own. Okay, so when we talk about IP ownership, when we talk about owning something and how a fan, for example, can participate in the ownership of their content creator that they're obsessed with, that lives in Web 3. Okay, so the last sentence of the Web 3 bullet, most important, ownership is really the key word. It's the cornerstone of new user experiences and comes through in user ownership of media assets like NFTs. And there's a change up in the order of presentations. You were gonna learn about NFTs before me, so I actually don't do a deep dive, but I do give you a case study of the NFT, my first NFT that I worked on, so we'll talk about that. So here's a visual of the evolution of the web, right? So another way just to see it, because we all learn differently. Web 1, read. Web 2, read, write. Web 3, read, write, execute, and I want to add the word ownership, which we talked about. So evolution of ownership in the IP context for content creators, as that has also evolved, right? So actors, musicians, celebrities, back in the day, including not so long ago, if you kept up with Dave Chappelle drama or whatever, there is, people get hired, and it's a work for hire, right? I think we all know what that means. You receive money, and in exchange for that money, you're giving up ownership to your work, right? So that's what it was. Then all of a sudden came creators, content creators and influencers, and everything changed. It changed because when they were being hired by brands completely expected, just when they hired Jennifer Aniston for Smart Water, and she's an actor, they own the proceeds of all of the content that's created, right? But when an influencer gets hired, the influencer owns that content. Why? What happened? What happened is you're hiring the influencer in part for their audience, and you can't own them, right? And so you're paying them to create content for you, you're paying them to incorporate it into their content and distribute it on their platform, and for that, the influencer retains ownership. and the brand has a usage right. And so the IP ownership dynamic completely shifted. And then Web3, next evolution, shared ownership. And again, I'm talking about it like it is in the future. And the future is like, we're here. I don't want to say the future is here, but we haven't crossed to it yet. So like, what does it exactly look like? Unclear, especially because you're going to deal with securities issues, and how are you giving up ownership or selling a security without being in violation of our laws? But it's there, and there's plenty of companies that are operating in this space. We'll see how long that lasts, but it's there. So NFTs, right? So because of blockchain technology, we're able to have NFTs, non-fungible tokens, right? The benefits of them include proof of authenticity, right? So in the past, if you were to buy something, let's say you bought a Louis Vuitton bag, you had to hope that you either bought it from an authorized retailer, or you were an expert in looking at the details of the metalwork and the logo, and did they cut it off, and are the proper designations there to know? But because it's not passed through a channel and you haven't seen the full life from start to you receiving it, there's no real way to know if it's real, right? With an NFT, it is what it is. As long as it stays on the blockchain, you know it's authenticated, the owner, you can't change it. The scarcity, you'll know how many tokens are created. The transferability, and there could be utility around the token too. So you might buy a token that gives you access to a concert, and it might give you meet and greet with the band, right? There's some functionality with the token too, which is pretty cool. So I'm gonna give you, the reason I brought up Emily Ratajkowski, this is the first NFT I worked on, but I think it's a very interesting example of IP ownership and the evolution of ownership and taking back some power as a result of technology. So here's the story. I hope you find it interesting. So Emily is a model. She's an activist, she's a writer, she published a book called My Body. And when she first started in the industry, she did a photo shoot for Sports Illustrated. She got paid, you can see in this photo, $250. This is not confidential information, it's already public, look it up. And when she did the photo shoot, she posted some of the outtake images on her Instagram. And there is a photographer artist that decided to do an entire exhibition by just printing photos from Instagram and blowing them up and then selling them. So this artist sold a photo of her for, I think it was like $100,000 in a gallery. Mind you, she's a model. She made $250. The photographer that blew up the image doesn't own the image. Who owns the image? Not Emily, not Instagram, but either the photographer or Sports Illustrated that paid for it. More likely than not, Sports Illustrated, right? Hired the photographer, worked for a hire basis, we talked about this, got paid to do the job, they own the image. So this artist blows up the image, sells it, and she's very upset. She said, I didn't make any money when I did the photo shoot. I didn't make any money when I distributed it on Instagram. And yet this guy made $100,000. So she took other jobs, made some money, bought this image of herself back. And it was kind of this moment where she put it up in her house and she's like, I made it. I'm upset that this happened. No one else owns this artwork. It's mine. It's gonna live in my house. So then NFTs started blowing up, let's call it a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. And she's like, what if I do to him what he did to me? So she took a photo of herself in front of the photo that he blew up of her. And she used this as a marketing tool for her book. And she created an NFT, and we partnered with Christie's, and we auctioned the NFT. And it was all around taking power over your body, your image, your likeness, and controlling the narrative over how you're being used. So through this NFT, she sold it for, this article says 140, I think that was after Christie's took their cut. And so this was the first NFT that I worked on. But what I love about it is a couple things I love and a couple things that scare me. The thing that scared me the most is when Emily was interviewed about it, she herself was like, oh my goodness, how many layers of infringement are in this NFT? And as her lawyer, I don't love hearing my client talk about that. But with that said, I think, look, if Sports Illustrated didn't go after the artist that blew up the image, they're certainly not going to go after her, who's the subject of it and who created an NFT with a story around it, right? So there may have been some fair use defenses. Anyway, so the cool thing about this NFT, in addition to all the things I shared with you, is that it lives on blockchain, right? So somebody bought it and she got paid the first time. But when that person transfers it again, she'll get paid another time. And when that person sells it, and again, the value could increase, she will continue to participate in the secondary market. So unlike Shane and his painting before his Michael Jordan celebrity days, she will participate in the increased value of the token. Everything makes sense so far? Okay. So what exactly is being bought or sold, right? And so when we talk about this NFT, for example, it's just as if it was Shane's painting. It's just the asset itself and not the underlying intellectual property. And if there's a utility attached to the NFT, perhaps you're gaining an experience, or you're gaining access or something else, but it needs to be expressly laid out in the smart contract what you are receiving, right? And so this leads me to talk about smart contracts generally. Smart contracts, as you may or may not know, it's a bunch of code. It's not like you can print it and see what the terms are. And so for lawyers like me, it's kind of scary because you have to trust that what you're told it says, it actually says, right? And so when you're creating smart contracts with these big platforms, like if it's through OpenSea or a platform that you has some credibility, I think you can trust more so that the contract says what it says it's supposed to say. But I've been learning that there are these audit firms that are extremely important because they help bridge the gap between coders and technology and lawyers who are creating what the rules are in real time, right? And we want to make sure that what we've decided that contract says actually says that. And so that's, I think, going to be really, really helpful because what happens in reality versus what you're trying to create, there may be a disconnect. And so I think there'll be some legal issues there in the future, especially, again, because we're just lawyers, right? And so without having that technology in our back pockets, it's almost impossible for us to be able to tell. So predictions, is blockchain technology here to stay? I mean, I think without question, the answer is yes. And I'm myself, I'm an expert in the content creator economy. And for me, it's going to be fascinating to see the implications of blockchain on the economy and how payments are going to be collected and distributed and the impact. So that's it. Thank you.